You know, they say high school can be tough, but this was something else entirely. Imagine this, the son of a truly renowned vocalist, basically set up to sing at a school event purely as a cruel prank. Hey everybody, some loudmouth, Kevin I think his name was, bellowed, get ready for the great singer's kid to totally bomb. You could just feel the nastiness in the air as his laughter bounced around the assembly hall. All these other teens looking at each other, smirking. So there he was, Daniel Washington, just 17, standing all by himself on this stage. The stage lights felt less like they were illuminating him and more like they were pinning him down, an island of harsh brightness. He was looking out at a sea of faces, mostly pale, and almost all of them wearing these mean, expectant grins. This was Northwood Prep, you see, one of those fancy private schools. It was the kind of place where kids from wealthy families showed off their important family names and had attitudes to match. A place where teenagers drove high-end cars and were always trying to outdo each other with the next over-the-top party. Daniel, well, he was sort of the school's token scholarship student. He was a black kid from Detroit who'd earned a full ride while his mother, Eleanor Washington, a real R&B legend, was off touring the globe. The mic is live, Mr. Washington, Principal Davis said, her smile just dripping with fakeness. Since you were so keen on being in the talent showcase, she went on, we're all just dying to see what you have for us. A wave of chuckles went through the crowd. Pretty much everyone there knew Daniel hadn't asked for any of this. It turned out Kevin and his buddies had faked Daniel's signature on the sign-up sheet. It was all part of this big, nasty plan to embarrass him. Let's see if musical talent actually runs in that family, they'd been whispering in the quarters. The thing was, Daniel had never, ever sung in front of anyone. He actually went out of his way to avoid any link to his mother's fame. It wasn't because he was ashamed. Eleanor Washington was incredible, a winner of 6 Grammys, a true powerhouse. It was more that he was just so tired of being boiled down to the famous singer's son. Ever since he'd started at Northwood Prep 7 months earlier, he'd been stuck with that label, no matter how hard he pushed himself in his studies to show he was more than that. It was weird, wasn't it? How nobody seemed to bring up his mother being black when they wanted a selfie with him or were hoping for concert tickets. But the moment they wanted to cut him down, suddenly his skin color was the go-to punchline, always wrapped up in some comment they'd claim was just friendly teasing. We're still here, Daniel, Principal Davis pushed, tapping her fingers impatiently. Or are you thinking of backing out? He could literally feel all those eyes on him. The anticipation of his failure so thick in the air, you could almost touch it. Way at the back, he spotted Kevin and his crew, phones out, all set to record his downfall and make it the next viral joke. I don't have anything ready, Daniel said. His voice was quiet, but you could hear the resolve in it. Oh, what a pity, the principal said back, with an overly dramatic sigh. Perhaps another time then. I suppose we could, he started, then paused. But I can try to come up with something, he finished. You could have heard a pin drop in that assembly hall. From her spot in the first few rows, Ms. Albright, the music teacher, was watching him, and he couldn't quite figure out her expression. Just the week before, she'd stumbled upon him in the music room after classes, quietly humming to himself while he was looking through a social studies text. He hadn't even realized she was in the room until he heard her drop some music sheets. You don't have to go through with this, Daniel, Ms. Albright said to him now, her voice soft. She was probably the only one in that whole school who had a sense of who he really was. Daniel just took a really deep breath. He felt like he had 2 choices. He could walk off that stage, completely defeated, or he could show them a side of himself he'd always kept locked away. He shut his eyes for a second, and there was this burning feeling in his chest. It wasn't just anger, but this quiet, steady determination. He recognized that feeling. Actually, he announced, and his voice was so calm it even took him by surprise, I'm going to sing a piece my mom wrote. A ripple of shock went through the students, but she never put it on an album or performed it for anyone. Even the meanest kids there were suddenly curious. An unreleased song from Eleanor Washington? Now that was something they'd want to record and share. What none of them at Northwood Prep could possibly know was that long before Eleanor became a star, before the Grammys and the sold-out arenas, she was just a single mom, singing lullabies to her little boy in their small Detroit apartment. Daniel hadn't just grown up hearing her incredible voice. He'd learned from it, absorbed it. As he moved the mic closer, his gaze locked with Kevin's, who was still smirking that ugly smirk. But there was something in Daniel's steady, determined look that made that bully's grin flicker. just for a moment. "This song," he said, his voice barely above a whisper into the mic, after another deep breath, "is called Hidden Ground." And then he started to sing. The very first note wobbled a bit, but it found its strength almost immediately. It was this incredibly soulful melody with hints of the blues, the kind of piece that really needed perfect vocal control and a whole lot of emotion. Daniel's voice, completely shattering everyone's expectations, wasn't just on key, it was stunning. It was deep, resonant, with a quality that it seemed almost impossible for a 17-year-old. Down in the third row, Kevin actually blinked, a look of pure confusion on his face. This was definitely not what he'd planned. The big public shaming was morphing into something entirely unexpected. Daniel sang about roots, growing unseen but strong, right under the pavement. He sang about feeling the history of his people and his very being. He sang about trying to stay strong and whole in a world that seemed determined to break you down. With every single word, every perfectly held note, it felt like he was shedding layers of a personality he'd built up just to protect himself. Right there in the front row, Miss Albright was watching, and you could see tears in her eyes. She'd seen something pretty amazing in that music room just the week before. It wasn't just raw ability, but the kind of focus and polish that only comes from years of hard work. After those music sheets had scattered, she'd asked him, why he kept a voice like that hidden. "Because I don't want to be just the kid singing his mom's stuff," Daniel had told her, kind of shrugging it off. "And I definitely don't want to be the scholarship kid who happens to sing. I want people to respect me for more than just my family name or what I look like." Ms. Albright knew exactly what he was talking about. As a Latina violinist who traded the performance stage for a teaching career, she understood all too well about being boxed in by labels and what others expected. "But if you deny your talent," she'd said to him back then, "you're denying a real part of yourself." Now, as Daniel's voice just soared through the assembly hall, Ms. Albright could see he'd finally gotten that lesson. It was almost too late when she noticed Kevin slipping out a side door of the hall, whispering with a couple of his buddies, all of them with those nasty smirks on their faces. The song hit a short instrumental break, and Daniel opened his eyes. Some of the students had actually stopped recording on their phones. A few others looked genuinely blown away. Principal Davis was frowning. You could tell she was completely rethinking her opinion of their scholarship project. And that's when the trouble started. The stage lights suddenly began to flash like crazy. Then, this awful high-pitched screeching noise blasted through the sound system. It was obvious someone had gotten into the tech controls. Daniel faltered for a second, missed a note, but he didn't stop singing. When the sound came back on, some thumping, jarring electronic beat was laid right over his voice, booming through the speakers. Kevin's friends were clearly at it again, trying to turn his performance back into a joke. The audience looked totally confused, staring at the stage. Some of them started laughing, maybe thinking the interference was supposed to be part of the act. But others began to murmur, figuring out it was sabotage. Principal Davis actually stood up, ready to step in, but before she could make a move, something incredible happened. Daniel shifted his voice. Instead of trying to fight against that annoying electronic beat, he worked with it. He changed the song's rhythm on the fly, turning that awful disruption into part of the music. All those years watching his mother improvise during rehearsals and concerts had taught him how to spin accidents into advantages. The looks on Kevin and his friends' faces went from mean satisfaction to pure disappointment. The crowd, which just moments before seemed braced for a complete train wreck, was now witnessing something truly special, a real display of musical genius. The students who were still filming even started to sway with the music. Some even held up their phones with the flashlights on, like they were at an actual concert. The song had taken on a whole new energy, way bigger than the mean-spirited prank that had started it all. When it finally ended, the silence that followed only lasted about 2 seconds before the place just erupted with applause. And it wasn't that polite, forced kind of clapping either. This was real, out of nowhere, totally surprised applause. A kid in the front row, Jason, I think, whose family had a ton of money from tech startups and who usually sided with Kevin, was the first one on his feet, starting a standing ovation. Then others joined in. Kevin just sat there, arms crossed, his face all twisted up and bitter. His look said it all. This isn't finished. Backstage, after all the clapping died down, Ms. Albright found Daniel, and he was shaking a little, the adrenaline still pumping. You had a feeling they'd try something like that, didn't you? She asked him quietly. Daniel nodded. Kevin had mentioned something about a surprise for my performance. That's why I picked this particular song, Daniel explained. My mother wrote it so I could improvise with it, change it up depending on the crowd. And you knew it so well you could just roll with their sabotage, Ms. Albright added, sounding really impressed. They totally misjudged you. They always do, Daniel replied with a little half smile. Is that why you went ahead and performed, even though you knew they were setting you up to make a statement? Daniel paused for a moment. Not really. Singing was never part of my plan. But last night, he went on, hesitating like he wasn't sure he should say more. After I found out they'd faked my application, I got an email. He took a breath. An email from the Juilliard School of Music in New York City. A scholarship program for exceptional talent. My mother sent them a recording of me singing. She never told me. The teacher's eyebrows shot up. That's one of the top music schools in the entire country, she said, and they want to hear you live. An audition. Next week. Daniel just ran his hand over his face. Can you believe it? My own mother never even told me she thought I was that good. Ms. Albright put a hand on his shoulder gently. Sometimes parents see things in us, potential we just don't see in ourselves. Their conversation was cut short when a bunch of students came into the dressing room, all wanting to congratulate Daniel. Amid all the compliments and questions about his famous mother, not many people noticed Kevin standing near the doorway, his expression cold and calculating. He was typing away furiously on his phone. Enjoy this, Kevin whispered when he finally pushed past Daniel. I've made sure it won't last long. There was a chilling confidence in his voice that sent a shiver down Daniel's spine. Whatever Kevin was cooking up now, Daniel felt it was way worse than just some flickering lights or messed up sound. Later that night, when he got back to his residence hall room on campus, Daniel got a notification. Someone had posted a video of his performance on the school's online forum. But it wasn't just the video, it was the comments underneath. The very first one, from an anonymous account, Howard, find out the real story behind Daniel Washington's talent and why his mother keeps him out of the spotlight. Link in the replies. The video Kevin had put out wasn't just Daniel singing, no. It was a nasty mashup, cutting Daniel's performance with old clips of his mother, Eleanor Washington, trying to make it look like he was just a bad copy with no real talent. The caption was brutal. Exclusive. Why does superstar Eleanor Washington keep her son off stage? Sources say record labels rejected him for being totally unoriginal. Sad. Daniel's stomach dropped. It wasn't the first time they'd tried to tear him down, but never this publicly, this viciously. Ignoring me now? His mother's voice came through when he finally picked up. Eleanor Washington was a global star, a super busy single mom, and had zero tolerance for unfairness. I just saw that trash you posted. I'm on the next flight. No, Mom, Daniel protested quickly. That'll just feed the fire. Kevin would absolutely love turning this into a bigger circus. Silence on the line for a beat. You're right, Eleanor said finally. This is your fight, but I can still help in other ways. Back in his residence hall room, Daniel just stared at the ceiling. Beside him, his roommate Leo, a quiet guy from Philadelphia he barely ever spoke to, actually offered to help. My dad's a libel attorney, Leo said, not even looking up from his tablet. And I'm decent at online tracing. Daniel gave him a surprised look. Since when do you even care? Leo finally met his eyes. Since I heard you sing and saw what they pulled after. Some things just crossed the line, man. Meanwhile, in the music room, Ms. Albright was launching her own counterattack. As the advisor for the student paper, she had access. Look here, she said, showing Daniel a folder on her computer. I've recorded all the student government meetings for the last 3 years for our records. Guess whose voice is all over them? Sure enough, the files had Kevin's voice, openly talking about how he'd manipulated the conduct board, influenced grades, even covered up past bullying incidents involving other scholarship students. It was him, unknowingly confessing to a whole system of abuse. This is, Daniel started, stunned. Pure gold, Ms. Albright finished for him. We just need the perfect time to use it. That time came quicker than they figured. Kevin, feeling high and mighty from his online attack's apparent success, called a special student government meeting. He was president, of course, to talk about artistic integrity in the talent showcase. He had no idea Daniel had gotten a heads up from Jason, the kid who'd been the first to give him that standing ovation. In the large assembly hall, the student government met with the school administration. Kevin looked smug, perfect in his tailored jacket, while Principal Davis watched him with clear approval. We have proof, Kevin began, shooting a knowing look at Daniel, who was sitting quietly at the back, that certain participants used shady tech to fake their performances. Just then, the assembly hall doors swung open. It wasn't Eleanor Washington who walked in, which is who everyone, Daniel included, half expected. It was a middle-aged black man dressed in a simple but sharp suit, Samuel Price, a multi-Grammy-winning music producer and Daniel's godfather. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Mr. Price said, his voice used to taking charge in recording studios. "Ms. Albright invited me to discuss a potential partnership with Northwood's arts program." Kevin blinked, thrown off. This wasn't the showdown he'd planned. "Mr. Price!" Principal Davis stood up immediately, recognizing the famous producer. "What an incredible honor." "The honor's all mine," Price answered, walking down the main aisle, "especially after seeing this video that's going around. I was very impressed by this young man's ability." The principal looked lost. "Video?" Ms. Albright hit the projector. The screen didn't show Kevin's hit piece. Instead, it was the raw, unedited footage of Daniel's song, including the part where the lights went wild and that electronic beat crashed his performance. "As a producer with over 20 years in the business," Price went on, "I know talent when I hear it, but this next part impressed me most." The image switched. Now it showed Kevin and his buddies barging into the control room, clearly messing with the equipment while Daniel was singing. "Surveillance footage," Ms. Albright explained quietly to the shocked principal, "put in after last year's property damage case." Kevin went white. That's completely out of context." "And this too?" Price asked as the screen changed again. Now it displayed screenshots of Kevin's own messages, plotting not just the talent showcase sabotage, but the whole character attack online. "Let's bury the black kid before anyone realizes he's better than us," one message read. The hall went dead silent. "How did—" Kevin stammered, looking to the principal for any sign of support. "Your friend Jason felt he needed to come clean," Daniel said, finally speaking up. "He gave everything to Leo and Ms. Albright last night." Principal Davis looked like she'd aged a decade in 10 minutes. "Kevin, my office, now." As Kevin, totally defeated, stumbled out, Mr. Price turned to Daniel, a smile on his face. "So, you kept it quiet, huh?" Daniel Washington just smiled a little, shaking his head. "Kept what quiet?" Ms. Albright asked. Samuel Price's grin got wider. "Well, besides Daniel being my godson, he also recorded a full album at my studio last year, and it's set to release next month." You could see the shock, then the dawning understanding on everyone's faces. "It's true," Daniel confirmed, his voice steady. "I didn't want it out. Wanted to be judged for my own work, not my mom's name or who I knew. But now," he glanced towards the door where Kevin had just made his disgraced exit. "Now I think it's time people heard my music." The image switched. Now it showed Kevin and his buddies barging into the control room, clearly messing with the equipment while Daniel was singing. "Surveillance footage," Ms. Albright explained quietly to the shocked principal, "put in after last year's property damage case." Kevin went white. That's completely out of context." "And this too?" Price asked as the screen changed again. Now it displayed screenshots of Kevin's own messages, plotting not just the talent showcase sabotage, but the whole character attack online. "Let's bury the black kid before anyone realizes he's better than us," one message read. The hall went dead silent. "How did—" Kevin stammered, looking to the principal for any sign of support. "Your friend Jason felt he needed to come clean," Daniel said, finally speaking up. "He gave everything to Leo and Ms. Albright last night." Principal Davis looked like she'd aged a decade in 10 minutes. "Kevin, my office, now." As Kevin, totally defeated, stumbled out, Mr. Price turned to Daniel, a smile on his face. "So, you kept it quiet, huh?" Daniel Washington just smiled a little, shaking his head. "Kept what quiet?" Ms. Albright asked. Samuel Price's grin got wider. "Well, besides Daniel being my godson, he also recorded a full album at my studio last year, and it's set to release next month." You could see the shock, then the dawning understanding on everyone's faces. "It's true," Daniel confirmed, his voice steady. "I didn't want it out. Wanted to be judged for my own work, not my mom's name or who I knew. But now," he glanced towards the door where Kevin had just made his disgraced exit. "Now I think it's time people heard my music." And just like that, what Kevin planned as a final takedown became the launch of a talent the world would soon get to know, not as Eleanor Washington's son, but as Daniel Washington, a real artist. By that evening, 2 videos were blowing up online. One of Daniel's incredible performance, the other of Kevin being walked off campus, his own humiliation going viral. Sometimes the meanest pranks have the most surprisingly fair endings. Northwood Prep felt different that Tuesday morning. Notices for a special assembly were everywhere. The school's social media announced big changes to conduct codes and anti-discrimination rules. In under 3 days, Kevin's scandal had shaken the place to its core. Daniel slipped in through a back way, dodging the reporters and curious eyes at the main gate. News about his upcoming album had somehow reached the local papers, drawing a lot of unexpected buzz. "How's it feel?" his roommate Leo asked as they headed to class. Being the guy who exposed years of hidden school bias, Daniel just adjusted his backpack, like someone who just wanted to study quietly. In Principal Davis's office, things were tense. Davis, now facing an investigation by the district board for oversight failures, looked nervously at the conduct board members. "The Kevin Hammond situation isn't unique," a new crisis consultant stated. "Ms. Albright's recordings show a clear pattern of protecting certain students." Outside Northwood Prep, Kevin's world was collapsing. His early acceptance to Princeton? Gone. 3 other top colleges pulled their offers. His father, a top CEO, was fielding tough questions from investors about ethics and community standing. Last anyone saw, Kevin was leaving his parents' house with 2 bags, reportedly off to a military school in Montana. His Snap Story account, once full of yacht pics and fancy parties, was shut down after a flood of hate. Meanwhile, Samuel Price's studio was electric. Daniel, in a studio chair, listened to the final tracks of his album, Hidden Ground. "Always knew you were special," Price said, tweaking the soundboard. "But what happened at that school? It added a depth to your music that wasn't there." "Life, I guess," Daniel said with a small smile. His phone buzzed, a message from his mom, Eleanor, finally on her way back from her world tour. Proud doesn't even start to cover it. "I don't thank him for the prejudice. Nobody should face that. But I thank him for making me face the fear that held me back." "Kevin wanted to show me my place," Daniel said. And he did, ironically. It just wasn't the place he thought. Northwood Prep turned its old talent show into an annual diversity celebration, officially named Groundswell Fest, honoring the song Daniel sang that day. It quickly became a top event, drawing diverse talents from all over. Picture this. 3 years down the line, Daniel Washington stood on that Northwood Prep stage again. This time, he was a special guest for the graduation. Talk about irony, right? The very same stage that was supposed to be his big public embarrassment now welcomed him back like a star. Before he sang his final song, he shared something with them. He said, "You know, we all hit these moments where other people try to tell us who we are, what we're capable of. And when that happens," he went on, "we've got a choice. Either we buy into their version or we answer with our own truth." He paused, then added, "And that truth, once you really find it, has a kind of power that no amount of prejudice can ever shut down." It really makes you think. What Kevin and those guys did was awful, meant to destroy him. But in the end, Daniel didn't just find his voice. He found out that when you know your own worth, deep down, nobody else truly has the power to define you or your story.